I'd like to open the meeting. Welcome to meeting number 36 of the House of Commons Standing Transport Infrastructures and Communities Committee, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February 3rd of this year. The committee is meeting to study anticipated labour shortages in the Canadian transportation sector. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and over Zoom.
Are from the Air Transport Association of Canada, Mr. John McKenna, President and Chief Executive Officer. From the Canadian Council for Aviation and Aerospace, Mr. Robert Donald, Executive Director. From the National Airline Council of Canada, we have Jeff Morrison, President and Chief Executive Officer. From NAV Canada, nous avons Monsieur Ben Girard, Vice-Président et
Ben Girard, Vice President and Chief of Operations.
Stakeholder and Industry Relations. From Pascan Aviation, we have Julian Roberts, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Yanni Gagnon, Executive Vice President and co-owner. And from Unifor, we have Kaylee Thiessen, National Representative, Research Department. We will now begin the opening remarks with Air Transport Association of Canada for 5 minutes. The floor is now yours.
Good afternoon, bonjour. The Air Transport Association of Canada has represented this country's commercial air transport industry since 1934. 175 members are engaged in all levels of commercial aviation and flight training in every region of Canada. Our membership ranges from the very large domestic, transborder, and international carriers, regional carriers, flight training organizations, and the Canadian air transport support industry. The labor shortage in the commercial aviation sector is at a critical stage. Also, the industry has been dealing as best it can with shortages of personnel for many years through enhanced recruitment, training, retention strategies, and importing experienced aviation personnel through immigration. The ever-growing shortage has been greatly exacerbated by the impact of the COVID-19, particularly in the restart phase of operations. L'état actuel des choses.
The current state of affairs, if left without appropriate and quick Government of Canada action, will not only prevent the air transportation system from recovering, but will be sure to deteriorate at a fast pace. This will have a devastating impact on the overall Canadian economic outlook, as all industries in our export-focused country rely on available and efficient transportation of people and goods. Northern and remote regions which rely on aviation as an essential service will be particularly vulnerable to unstable aviation transportation due to lack of resources.
Crews, air traffic controllers, and aircraft maintenance and related personnel are all at critical levels and are expected to continue to be so for the foreseeable future. When referring to shortages in personnel maintenance, this is not just related to licensed aircraft maintenance engineers and design engineering staff, but also to the so-called unskilled trades, such as baggage handlers, cargo loaders, fuelers, and de-icing crews. Our industry is subjected to never before encountered delays in processing service requests at many federal government departments. What used to require up to 90 days now requires easily 2 to 3 times that long, leaving millions of dollars of equipment idle. Our industry is also being harshly impacted through poor levels of service by the lack of experienced engineers and inspectors within our regulated Transport Canada Civil Aviation. Afin de rétablir le système de transport.
In order to see the air transportation system successfully recover following the pandemic, and in the new labor realities, we need serious assistance from the government, and we need it now, not sometime in the distant future. This assistance can be provided in various forms to be successful, innovative solutions based on regulatory streamlining and efficient alternative methods utilizing the latest technology for training are key. Canada must quickly catch up to other major regulatory systems such as the US FAA, the UK CAA, and Europe's EASA in these matters.
Allowance by TCCA, for which we are very grateful, to use exemptions of alternative equivalent processes for training and licensing. ATAC urgently encourages TCCA to embed these and other proven alternatives widely accepted by other major regulators into the Canadian aviation regulations. This will not only enable Canada to properly support our industry at a time of dire need, but will do so both efficiently for both the regulator and the industry. This would lead to a truly safe and efficient transportation system that Canada is so reliant upon and would be proud of. Finally, Canada has been asking the Canadian government to cooperate in the establishment of a federally guaranteed loan program to support the next generation of commercial pilot training. Access to funding has been identified as one of the major barriers to entry for youth considering aviation as a career. Near full employment of professional pilots would result in near zero exposure for the government in a guaranteed loan program, so desperately needed to help train the next generation of pilots, especially in these times of high interest rates. ATAC and its members stand ready to continue to cooperate with TCCA on the development and implementation of these required improvements as quickly as possible. Je vous remercie. Thank you. Il me fera plaisir de répondre à vos questions.
I'll be happy to answer any of your questions to the best of my abilities.
Next, we have the Canadian Council for Aviation and Aerospace. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. I'm sorry, Mr. Donald, I believe you're on mute. If you could unmute yourself and restart. Don't worry, that won't affect your time. I'll let you restart, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good afternoon. The Canadian Council for Aviation and Aerospace, le Conseil canadien de l'aviation et de l'aérospatiale, CCAA, is a not-for-profit national partnership organization working with industry, labor, educators, and government. CCAA is the only national organization dedicated exclusively to the labor market and the workforce in the aviation and aerospace industry. The 2 points I'd like to talk to you about this afternoon, the critical labor shortage as referred to by John McKenna just a minute ago, and the need to improve the system for access to foreign workers. Critical skill shortage, some of you will be familiar with the 2018 CCA Labor Market Information Study. The study documented the critical skills gap in the sector and is the most widely cited report on the subject. At that time, the study projected 55,000 new workers were needed by 2025. CCA has recently completed a new study, which will be published shortly. The new projection is for 58,000 workers by 2028. Of that, air transport requires 31,800 approximately, which is 58% of the current workforce. Support activities for air transport, 13,200, 50% of the current workforce. Aerospace manufacturing, 13,100, 25% of the current workforce. Pilots, of the 31,000, 7,574 pilots are needed. 5,203 aircraft mechanics are needed. Air transport will see high replacement demand and insufficient supply of new entrants. Replacement demand, retirees comprise 38% of the total hiring requirements. The balance is growth. There are projected to be 5,000 and change projected new entrants to the industry, which makes up less than 20% of the 31,000 needed. So 26,800 workers will need to be found from other industries or other jurisdictions. ICAO, Boeing, IATA, all document the shortages are worldwide. So recruiting from other jurisdictions will continue to be challenging as it is from other sectors. The other point I want to talk to you about is streamlining the process for hiring foreign AMEs, aviation maintenance engineers. All Canadian companies prefer to hire within Canada for obvious reasons. However, as mentioned, Canada cannot produce enough workers, so companies are often forced to hire foreign workers. Process is time-consuming and costly. Adding 2 NOC codes to the list of critical labor shortages would make an important step towards making the process less costly and faster for a critical part of the industry. Those NOC codes are 7315, aircraft mechanics and inspectors, and NOC code 7244 for avionics and electronic technicians. All companies need a mixture of experienced workers and apprentices. Hiring 20 experienced foreign workers allows a company to hire 20 additional apprentices. The other important related point is recognition of foreign trained AMEs by Transport Canada. According to a recent report by CAMAC out of Quebec, Transport Canada refuses 99% of requests from AMEs licensed in other jurisdictions like EASA or FAA. While their experience is recognized elements of their academic education are considered deficient because foreign regulators have different requirements for academic training. So you have a licensed AME who's worked for a major airline, say in Germany for 20 years, authorized by Transport Canada to work on Canadian planes in that jurisdiction. They come to Canada, but they are not recognized by Transport Canada to be an AME here because 20 years ago, when they studied in Frankfurt, they didn't have exactly the same curriculum as required by Transport Canada for colleges in Canada. Moving to a competency-based system instead of this methodical bureaucratic approach would be important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer questions after the others have spoken.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donald. Next, we have the National Airlines Council of Canada. Floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you to the committee for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Jeff Morrison. I'm the President and CEO of the National Airlines Council of Canada, or NAC. NAC represents Canada's largest passenger air carriers, including Air Canada, Air Transat, Jazz Aviation LP, and WestJet. The mandate of our association is to promote safe, sustainable, and competitive air travel by advocating for the development of policies, regulations, and legislation to foster a world-class transportation system. This study that the committee is doing on anticipated labor shortages couldn't come at a more opportune moment. Canada's airlines and their workers have felt the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic acutely. This sector was among the first to hit and the last to recover. A large number of workers left the workforce during the COVID-19 pandemic, either voluntarily, through being furloughed, or offered early retirement. If there's one thing I would stress you take away from my remarks today, it is that there is no question that Canada's airlines are powered by the skills and talent of the people who work in this sector. Our success depends on them. And despite the many challenges that airlines and airline staff have had to face during the COVID pandemic period, I am pleased to state that our member airlines have been successful in returning their staffing capacity to 2019 levels. But we need to think about the future. The aviation ecosystem is reliant on the availability of a large, well-trained, competent workforce, and it must include professionals in adequate numbers to cater to the diverse roles found across the aviation sector and ecosystem. As legislators, you know that labor shortages aren't just buzzwords you read about on social media or hear about in the news. They impact the opportunity for sustainability and growth. And as you just heard from my colleague Robert from the Canadian Council for Aviation and Aerospace, their labor market information study forecasts a need to hire more than 58,000 workers by 2028 to meet industry attrition and growth. And just as a bit of perspective, that total is roughly 43% of the current aviation workforce. Donc, le secteur du transport aérien, en collaboration avec les intervenants.
The air transportation sector, in cooperation with the Government of Canada and the aviation industry, is working hard as it turns towards the future. It is counting on the Government of Canada to recognize foreign credentials of airlines and other personnel who work in this field. This includes medical certificates, security certificates, ID cards for regulated zones, and other information related to identification. Since the increase in travel, demand for accreditation has gone up, and we have to make sure that Transport Canada maintains additional resources and eliminates the backlog. Plus, it needs to make sure that the needs of travelers are met immediately, so the government has to act. As for new arrivals in Canada who want to work in aviation, we often see obstacles to the quick recognition of foreign credentials. And this is another area which my colleague Robert mentioned. We also believe this is another area where the Government of Canada can do more to promote airlines. as a positive career choice.
To promote airlines as a positive career of choice, similar to the efforts it has made to encourage students or new Canadians to pursue careers in the skilled trades. In fact, by coincidence, earlier today, the UK Department of Transport unveiled a new program called Generation Aviation that aims to boost recruitment into the UK aviation sector. The Canadian government could look at this new program as a model. And lastly, there is a need to use technology to further digitize services and requirements, which will help enhance the travel experience, whether that be, for instance, in airport operations or customs screening. As another example, biometrics could play a role in addressing labor shortages. It's critical that the Canadian airline industry remains competitive globally now and for decades to come, and that travelers have confidence that their journey is predictable, timely, enjoyable, and with clear service standards across the air travel ecosystem. This means ensuring that the airline sector continues to attract and retain skilled workers now and into the future. So again, Mr. Chair, thank you for the invitation, and I too look forward to the discussion. Merci encore.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Morrison. Prochainement, nous avons Nav.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Up next, NAV Canada. You have 5 minutes. NAV Canada is a nonprofit corporation that owns and operates the world's first privatized air navigation system, ensuring the safest, most efficient movement of aircraft from the Pacific to the Arctic to the mid-Atlantic, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Having enough people to deliver safe and efficient air navigation services is a top priority for the company. This includes recruiting, training, and staffing across a large number of roles, such as air traffic controllers, flight service specialists, technologists, aeronautical information specialists, pilots, engineers, and a range of supporting corporate employees. NavCan has a total of 4,400 employees, each playing an important role.
Maintain the highest level of safety and a high level of service reliability, and is still doing so today. Our direct contribution to system delays and bottlenecks represents a very small percentage of delays experienced within the aviation ecosystem. Nonetheless, we take any NAV Canada related delays extremely seriously. We have been able to mitigate these to a large extent through the commitment and efforts of all of our employees and the strong collaborative relationships that we enjoy with our unions, customers, and industry partners. Unfortunately, we have seen an increase in unplanned absences across the business, including those related to COVID, unpaid leave due to the vaccine mandate, unexpected retirements as people make lifestyle decisions, and additional leave entitlements applicable to federally regulated employers. In the few instances when a staffing shortage may have impacted service delivery, NAV Canada did everything possible to minimize our impact on the industry. These steps included working with our staff to backfill the absences with overtime, optimizing staff scheduling, and extending staff hours. To support our operation, we have issued contracts to more than 50 retired employees, redeployed staff from other units, hired controllers from foreign jurisdictions, and a number of other actions to ensure we have people in the right places. Like other stakeholders in this industry, NAV Canada has and continues to face challenges made worse by the pandemic as well as the current employment market. As others have told you, there are significant challenges recruiting people in the aviation industry. NAV Canada's staffing plan is aligned with future projected traffic over several years. Staffing plans take into account anticipated attrition and are mindful of our capacity to successfully train new employees. Supported by increased collaboration and information sharing with major airlines, we're monitoring traffic forecasts and its impact on staffing on an ongoing basis. We are planning for the future, both short and long term. Our frontline air traffic services training programs are currently running at full capacity. More than 250 individuals are currently in various phases of training, which can take between 24 to 36 months to complete. and an additional 500 trainees will enter training programs for operational roles over the next 2 years. We're also adding 250 employees in non-operational roles this year. The training for operational positions is delivered by training professionals and unionized operational employees. And on this basis, the unions contribute to success rates for certification in air traffic service. Modernizing training programs is a key strategic priority for NAV Canada. We are improving training efficiency to support increased employees in operational positions over the long term. In addition to a focus on staffing, NAV Canada is moving forward with strategic investments to introduce technology that increases safety, enables increased capacity, and reduces the environmental impact of aviation. Labor shortages are a complex issue, and there is no one simple solution to this issue. We are committed to working with our employees, unions, customers, stakeholders, and the government to continue to provide a world-leading service while investing to meet future needs of aircraft operators and the flying public. Nous avons travaillé et continuerons de travailler en collaboration.
We have been and will continue to work collaboratively to address scheduling and staffing issues and to continue to make NAV Canada an attractive place to build a career. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Girard. Next, Pascan Aviation, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Julian Roberts with Pascan Aviation. We're a regional airline operating on 703, 704, and 705 air operator certificates. We serve 11 regions in Quebec, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Ontario, moving 7,000 passengers per month on approximately 40 flights per day. We currently employ 200 aviation professionals. We've been invited today to discuss the labor shortage in the aviation sector. As a regional carrier based in Montreal, our employees are constantly solicited by mainline companies such as Air Canada, Jazz, WestJet, Sunwing, and Air Transat. This is not new for us, as these companies require experienced personnel, and they usually come to companies like ours for that experience. In the past years, we've experienced 50% turnover in flight crews alone. Up until recently, we usually had a nice stockpile of resumes of ambitious young women and men wanting to join our company. But since the pandemic, we've noticed a steady decrease in qualified professionals in our sector. We have problems recruiting specialized workers such as flight dispatchers, aircraft maintenance engineers, and ground service personnel. But our biggest challenge remains the pilot shortage. There are numerous reports that exist, I'm sure you have all seen, on current and future shortfalls of pilots in Canada, and the data is not good, especially for smaller regional carriers like ours. The pilot shortage is no surprise, nor is it a new issue. In 2019, we were already feeling this impact, but the pandemic alleviated the problem for us, temporarily anyway. Today, we're in a perpetual recruiting mode for all levels of personnel, especially for qualified pilots, but unfortunately, we see very few applying. We've increased our salaries and conditions significantly. We don't see better retention or attraction of these qualified workers because there just aren't many out there. When the new flight and duty regulations came into effect in 2020 for the 705 operators, the larger companies started to stockpile pilots, putting additional strain. For Pascan, we ended up requiring 30% more pilots in our 705 operations to do exactly what we were doing the previous year. Now, on December the 12th, the flight and duty regulations will come into effect for the 703 and 704 operators, once again impacting the number of pilots required. Unfortunately, we had to take the decision to cease our 703 operations earlier this year. And in early 2023, we will also suspend our 704 operations, greatly impacting regions we serve, as the required number of pilots will be too high and our operations will no longer be viable. The effects on regional airlines will eventually make its way to the mainline carriers as well. New pilots coming onto the market will have less options to build hours and experience in the smaller 703 and 704 operations. I understand I'm focusing a lot on the pilot shortage today, but without the pilots to fly my planes, I won't require anyone to dispatch them or any mechanics to fix them. So where has everybody gone? As I stated earlier, the shortage isn't new, but it's just been amplified. I think a lot due to the pandemic. Lots of early retirement packages were given out to the pilots at Air Canada, WestJet Air Transit. Some people just decided to start different careers due to the instability in the industry. The pandemic greatly impacted training of new pilots for almost 2 years. The cost to become a pilot is astronomical, and as interest rates increase, this will only be a further deterrent. There isn't much awareness out there either for young people that this is an incredible industry to work in. Regulation changes have also made a great impact on the pilot levels. As we're already in the middle of this shortage, there isn't much that can be done in the short term to solve this issue. Unfortunately, it will quickly get worse as bigger airlines ramp up and pilots start to leave for other countries like the USA under the EB2 program, offering unconditional green cards for pilots and their families, huge salaries and sign-on bonuses. For us, regional aviation is at risk, and we need help quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Unifor. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kaylee Thiessen. I work in the research department at Unifor, studying the air transportation sector as well as many other sectors. This is one of my favorites. Unifor represents more than 16,000 members working in the air transportation sector. We represent pilots, customer service representatives, ramp attendants, baggage handlers, flight attendants, airport authority workers, flight services specialists, and air traffic controllers. And all of our members, all of these workplaces have experienced the effects of a shortage of workers in the last year. These labor shortage conversations, it's nothing new. We've heard a couple of times today already that this is not something that's recent. These conversations have been ongoing. And one thing that we're all talking about in Unifor across the sector is higher quality work. That's one of the many solutions that is needed. What's become clear to our members as we listen to these conversations is that government doesn't truly understand the root of this problem. Our employers don't necessarily understand the root of the problem, or some of them just refuse to make the changes necessary to fix some of these issues. In higher wage jobs like air traffic control and with pilots, some of our employers have really manufactured a shortage of labor by failing to hire and train an appropriate number of workers after people have retired or even preparing ahead of time. In lower wage jobs, employers have manufactured a shortage by paying low wages and really creating very chaotic work rules that leave workers with little ability to plan their lives outside of work or to make ends meet. So they're going to work somewhere that maybe is more stable. In customer service roles, employers are able to hire people and they're filling the roles, but turnover is really high because of either inadequate training, low wages, and precarious schedules. The job that could be very fulfilling and used to be very fulfilling turns out to be less fulfilling as workers are subject to violence and harassment by customers and are provided with little support from their employers. It shouldn't be a surprise that if an employer treats their workers unfairly, they will be hard-pressed to retain them or to hire employees at all. I have a couple of examples. Our pilot members at Sunwing could soon be working side by side with people hired on temporary contracts who are paid more than they are for the same work. Sunwing has applied to hire workers through the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, but we believe that the company has not done enough to hire pilots who are available to work in Canada. We've heard reports from our members at Sunwing that they had upwards of 800 applicants for a recent job posting for pilots, but they only hired about 150 or less than a quarter of those qualified applicants. Sunwing has manufactured its own labor shortage by not hiring and training pilots in advance of the busy travel season and is now taking advantage of the current labor market situation in order to undermine our members' collective agreement and the quality of work available in Canada. permanent jobs could be offered to pilots from abroad who would become a part of the Canadian workforce, benefiting from the collective agreement and the general protections offered most workers in Canada. Another example, contract flipping. Contract flipping is a common practice in the sector that treats workers unfairly and leads to a shortage of people who are interested in doing that kind of work. Airport authorities and airlines, WestJet, Air Canada, virtually all international carriers that fly into Canada create incredibly precarious work by contracting out particular tasks, including baggage handling, wheelchair handling, customer service. Every few years, those contracts are flipped, new suppliers take over. That's kind of common practice. And the work is exactly the same, but the winning company does not have to hire the workers back or provide the benefits or the other provisions they may have earned over time. And the collective agreement does not follow the job either. Unifor members have faced this demeaning and really heart-wrenching situation at least 3 times this year when their employer lost a contract and they had to fight to be hired by the new company for less total compensation, fewer benefits, and actually a loss of any work rules that they had been able to negotiate. Furthermore, as I mentioned, our members are increasingly facing harassment from customers. They have insufficient training to conduct their jobs to the best of their ability. Employers are really abdicating this responsibility and then blaming workers for their lack of capacity. Some of these issues need to be solved by employers, but government has an important role to play in increasing standards and supporting safety and security in the industry too. Some concrete steps that government could take immediately to improve the labor situation at airports include institute a minimum living wage at airports across the country, implement full successor rights to ensure workers keep their jobs, pay, and collective agreements when a contract is flipped, enhance oversight of the temporary foreign worker program to ensure employers don't abuse the system and workers are treated fairly, grant migrant workers permanent residency status upon arrival to ensure equal rights and protections for all, so that's not being taken advantage of, and really help to develop and lead the development of a solution to the escalating problem of on-the-job harassment. Employers need to take responsibility for the frustration that their business models and technological change introduce into the system and take a stand to ensure customers no harassment won't be tolerated. Those are just a few of the solutions that are available that you can make right now. And I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thiessen. We will begin our round of questioning today with Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses. Really awesome testimony. And I suppose I just start out by saying all of us around this table on virtual, we all have a story about the airlines over the last 2.5 years, and most of those stories, although they're trying hard, aren't the most fun stories, to say the least. So this is really an important study. I'll start out, Mr. Chair, through you, sir, to Mr. Morrison. So, we heard you speak about that more people need to be trained. What specifically is needed by the government, or what could the government have done differently, and what does the future look like to get us out of this mess, quite frankly?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think, first of all, that the future is definitely looking better in the next few months and years than it has in the past several months and years. There is obviously no question. You've heard extensively about the impacts of COVID on our sector. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we were the first to be hit and the last to recover. The fact that our staffing levels at our member airlines are back to what they were in 2019, I think, is a positive development. Obviously, the fact that COVID restrictions have been removed as of October 1st is a positive development. The fact that we're seeing passenger volumes return to somewhat close to 2019 levels, again, is a positive development. But, there are lessons that will need to be learned from the pandemic, no question. And in particular, especially with the numbers that my colleague, Mr. Donald's group has put forth, the fact that we need to hire at least 58,000 new workers into this sector over the next 6 years is going to be, and frankly, I think the testimony of Mr. Roberts in terms of some of the challenges his company is facing is very
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, I have very, very limited time. I do have one more question for you, sir, through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Morrison, sir, you spoke about, using new technologies, just to speed up things is really what I kind of heard you say. And I will, with all due respect, sir, I've heard from CATSA and I've heard from CBSA unions that computers cannot be replaced by people. And that indeed it doesn't really speed things up. So I'm just curious, are you hearing a different story than I am? Because all the testimony that we've heard both on through more than just this committee, they're saying that it's actually not going to work. And we do know that ArriveCAN, quite frankly, was it really held people up as opposed to got them through quickly. Can you comment on that?
I think very quickly, if we just look at the history of technology over the past several years, we have seen improvements across the travel ecosystem via technology. It wasn't that long ago you had to call up a person to book a flight. Now you can do that online. It wasn't that long ago you had to go see an in-person custom agent when you were coming back to Canada. You can now do much of that online and via technology. So we do see it plays a role. Can it solve every problem in terms of minimizing disruptions? No, it can't. But can it play some role? Yes, it can. And again, we'd be happy to have more discussion on that with this committee.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Mr. McKenna, you spoke about how many more people that we need. And let me ask you this, sir. Do we have the proper resources to meet the demand today? Meaning, do we have the schooling systems? Do we have all the infrastructure we need, sir, to actually train these folks to get them on? I know it's not a click of the fingers overnight, but do we have that infrastructure there, to Mr. McKenna?
The training infrastructure is there. There's no problem. There's no doubt that it's there. Access to it is difficult because of funding, for one thing. And also because our regulations dates back to the 90s, and they're not modern, they're not up to date, they're not following the world trends as far as incorporating new teaching technologies and so on. So the infrastructure is there, the regulation is not, and the funding is desperately lacking.
Thank you, Mr. David, sir. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. David, very quickly on temporary foreign workers. My very simple, quick question to you, sir, is it standard across the globe? So if we were to bring in TFWs, temporary foreign workers, to help subsidize our workforce here in the aviation industry, is it standardized in that everybody would be safe on an airplane? The folks that are repairing our airplanes are safe? All of those types of jobs. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I hope this isn't coming off my time. Mr.
We'll
David?
make sure it doesn't,
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis.
Mr. David?
I think you might be best asking a question to another witness, Mr. Lewis.
Very well, sir. Very well, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'll go to, can you just tell me, Mr. Chair, how much time is left, please, sir?
You have 1 minute, 15 seconds.
Excellent. I'll conclude my line of questioning with Ms. Thiessen, if I could, Mr. Chair. So I have a private member's bill coming forward to Finance Committee, Ms. Thiessen, on Wednesday, and it's a travel tax deduction for skilled trade specifically. And what it does is it allows them to write off their meals, their lodging, and their hotels. And I know that you represent Unifor in a vast variety of sectors across Canada. Would this be something that Unifor would support for their workers, in that they could travel, upwards of 100 or 120 kilometers away from home, spend a few nights out of town to support the aviation industry? Is that something that would be palatable for Unifor and/or helpful for our workforce?
Answering that question is far above my pay grade today. So I will we'll have a conversation here and we can get back to you on that question.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Thiessen. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would certainly hope that you do get back to me. We look forward to your support, because any times we can help skilled trades, I think we're all on the same team. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Iacono. Monsieur Iacono, la parole.
Next, Mr. Iacono for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today. My first question is for Mr. Girard. To what extent do the different levels of government work together to help provide training to qualified candidates or workers in the sectors where they are most needed? Well, at NAVCAN, it's a little different. We don't necessarily hire a pilot trained at a school. We hire and train and qualify all these people at NAVCAN. So it's really time consuming to certify these people. It can take 2 to 3 years, as I said in my statement, for some of the jobs, including air traffic controllers. So the government isn't necessarily involved in that. So, Mr. Girard, did you have the same issue before the pandemic? Was it already there? Yes, it was the same thing. It was actually the same process that existed before the pandemic. How many years before the pandemic did that program go back? What do you mean by that? Well, just the lack of workers. Well, it was up and down over the years. I've been in this business for 34 years. Sometimes things are better, and sometimes things are not so good. 2008 hit us hard, and there were other crises that affected us over the years. But what's important to look at is that just before the pandemic, in some sectors, it wasn't too bad. In some units, in fact, we were overstaffed throughout the country. That's great. Thank you. Ms. Thiessen, to what extent is it easy for new workers, unexperienced ones, to enter your industry? And what can be done to help their integration, to bring them on board?
And it really depends on what job people are taking on and the training requirements. Of course, training to be a pilot, training to be a customer service representative, both require training extensively. Obviously, the training is incredibly different. At some of our employers where we have the most sort of new staff, or where levels of staff have come back to before the pandemic, levels that were available before the pandemic, we see that 60% of the staff are new. They haven't been trained as well as people were being trained before the pandemic. That creates a lot of frustration on the new employees and the employees with more seniority, our members with more seniority who have been working side by side with their new colleagues to try and make sure that everybody's up to task. And those frustrations then lead to people quitting and taking a job somewhere else. There's extremely high turnover. So the training is offered, not to the same extent that it could be.
I apologize for interrupting. So what are you doing to retain older workers or to bring back people who've left the labor market? What incentives do you have to bring them back?
Would be something that would be taken on by employers, not necessarily by the union. We'd be happy to work with our employers to develop an attraction and retention.
Do you work in collaboration with the employers? Because employers obviously need some kind of agreement with the unions.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to work in that collaboration to develop an attraction and retention program with our employers together.
OK. Et dans vos cas aussi, quelles sont les mesures des...
And what measures have been applied by different measures of government in order to address the labor shortage in your sectors? Have you worked with the different levels of government? You said earlier that the government doesn't understand the problem. So in your case, to the witness who said that, how do you address that issue, and how are you going to bring it up with the different levels of government?
For the air transportation sector, it is particularly working with the federal government. We have meetings, we've written many letters, particularly talking about the problems that we have with using the temporary foreign worker program, how we'd like to see permanent immigration that doesn't undermine the quality of work in Canada as one example, and we'll work directly with different government representatives in order to discuss those solutions and see them implemented. Another that we've talked about extensively is the full successor rights in order to end the worst effects of contract flipping, implementing living wages at airports across the country to increase the quality of work there. All of these pieces are very important. And how do we do that? By coming to things like this and then having other meetings, etc.
Merci. Monsieur Roberts,
Thank you. Mr. Roberts, how did things work before the pandemic with regard to the labor shortage?
on vous entend pas.
Malheureusement, Monsieur.
Unfortunately, Mr. Roberts, we cannot hear you. Oh, sorry about that. Well, as I mentioned earlier, before the pandemic, we received so many resumes on a regular basis, so we were able to keep the numbers up in our crews. So we had a lot of pilots with fewer hours, and it was easier to put them into the cockpit. But today, we only offer 200, or rather, today we get applications of pilots with 200 or 250 hours of flight, and that's not enough to put them in a cockpit. Thank you, Mr. Roberts and Mr. Yacono. Next, Mr. Barsalou-Duval, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by asking whether it would be possible for me to make sure that all witnesses have done a sound test. I wanted to mention this at the start of the meeting. Yes, absolutely, we did so, Mr. Barsalou-Duval. Thank you. My first question is for Mr. Morrison from the National Airlines Council. In your statement, you deplored long delays in accreditation for your staff and that it was really slow with the federal government. So how does this actually impact your operations? And given the overall labor shortage, how does this in particular affect you? Well, if I may, I'll answer in English.
Part of the challenges, especially over the past summer, were in receiving health certifications for pilots from Transport Canada. There were significant delays, much more longer delays than the average. And what that meant essentially is that pilots were sitting around not able to work. Another good example are any airline personnel who required access to sensitive areas of airports requiring a certification, an RAIC. There were delays in getting those out as well. And as a result, without those proper certifications, airline crews, including flight attendants, were not able to access airports, therefore were also not able to work. So that was a contributing factor to some of the disruptions that we saw this summer. We hope that those delays won't be repeated into the future.
Merci. J'ai aussi une question.
Thank you. I have also a question for Ms. Diaz from Unifor. At the Bloc Québécois, we've thought of some solutions to the labor shortage, and that would include recruiting experienced workers by bringing about financial incentives to get them to keep on working. But Ms. Diaz, do you think that is a viable solution? And do you have any other solutions that would help us bring back experienced workers?
For Ms. Diaz, who had some technical difficulties today, and so she couldn't join the meeting. In terms of attracting experienced workers, we're talking about higher quality work here. If someone left and went to a different job, they did so because the job was more attractive. That would mean higher pay. It would mean less chaotic scheduling, being able to plan your life and not just be following the whims of some scheduling technology as one piece of the puzzle. And then if there are other pieces of the puzzle attracting people coming back from retirement and those sorts of things, I would love to have a conversation about that, and we could talk about that here in the office and get back to you. I'm sure that Ms. Diaz has thought of that. Unfortunately, she just can't be here at the moment.
Madame Tyson, je parlais de la...
Ms. Tyson, I mentioned this because Often we hear about how long it takes to train someone, and once the training is done, they don't have the work experience. But experienced workers are the complete package, so really it's in everyone's interest to keep them longer, and you save on training, if you will, if you have those experienced workers. I also have a question for Mr. Roberts. We have already met outside of work. I've met with you and Mr. Gagnon to talk about the pilot shortage. So my question to you is this. Are there any specific measures that can be put in place which, in your opinion, rather the government can put in place to help you attract more pilots and to make it attractive for young people as a career? When I was younger, a lot of my friends thought aviation would be a cool career, but now it's so expensive to become a pilot. And the only way to become a pilot would be through the Air Cadets. Well, honestly, when I was younger, I was really drawn to aviation, and you don't really see that as much today. I have two young kids, and they never talk about wanting to become pilots or work in that sector, or their friends. It's almost like a fantasy to work in aviation. There's not a lot of advertising in schools or awareness. There are no programs out there like Mécano, which is offered in the cégeps. There are training schools for pilots, but they might churn out 30 a year when we need at least 300 a year. To become a pilot today, it's about $90,000. So you try to get your parents or a bank to lend you that kind of money. And again, this industry, especially in the last few years, has been really unstable, so the whole thing makes it hard. So I think there's some education that could be done in schools to get to make young people more aware of our industry. It's exciting. Aviation is really exciting, but you just don't see that kind of buzz out there amongst young people. They don't dream about working in the field like they did in the 90s, for instance. Thank you. Are you finished, or do you want to add anything? I'm done. You've got 10 seconds left. Well, I'll come back later on then. Great. Thank you so much.
Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. I'd like to ask a couple questions to Ms. Thiessen from Unifor. What you said, Ms. Thiessen, around contract flipping is particularly concerning. I was trying to imagine what it would be like to be an employee in one of those roles and to have a set of benefits as part of a collective agreement, and then to have the contract flip and to lose, the stability and the expectation of those every couple of years. I'm wondering if this problem has gotten worse in recent years, and secondly, wondering if you can point to a specific legislative or regulatory change that would help address this issue for employees in the air sector.
We definitely have a specific regulatory change, and the change is to implement full successor rights by changing the Canada Labour Code so that when a contract is flipped, the collective agreement goes with the new contract. And that would mean that any increases in pay, better benefits, sort of scheduling issues, time off, all of those different things, vacation time, all of those pieces that are in a collective agreement would move with the workers when they move to the new company. It's not that workers are getting fired, it's that a company lost the contract. Often a contract is flipped because a company comes in with a lower cost, and that happens because they can lower wages and working conditions. So if we amend the labor code to implement full successor rights, that would eliminate those worst effects of contract flipping on people.
Thiessen, you mentioned the idea of a minimum living wage at airports, and we've heard from airport authorities that have implemented minimum living wages. Are you aware of these, and could you share your thoughts on how these stack up?
I absolutely can. So we've seen in a number of different locations in the US that minimum standards for wages at airports can be increased quite dramatically. And what happens is the quality of work is better. Airports become more efficient. There's less turnover, and the customer service is higher quality. All of these different pieces. That's been the case in Seattle. It's been the case at Newark, LaGuardia, JFK, and LAX. LAX is actually a living wage employer. In Toronto, the living wage is $22 an hour, slightly different across the country, but there's a calculation that is done by many, many different communities across the country. That's something that could be implemented to quickly increase the quality of work at an airport.
And then finally, Ms. Thiessen, this issue of technological change in the air sector is an interesting one. I think it's hard to argue with the point that was made earlier that technology has made air travel and the air transport sector more efficient. I think all of us have experienced that as air passengers. From a labor perspective, what are the important things to consider as we see technology take on a larger role in that space?
We definitely want to see the people who do the job that use the technology or are being, some of the tasks are being replaced by technology. They need to be consulted. What often happens is technology is introduced. No one asks the people who have potentially 30 years of experience doing the job, what it's like to do the job, the challenges that come up, all sorts of things. And that means that those mistakes are embedded into a piece of technology. So when the baggage handling system breaks down, all customer service, call lines, new technology is introduced, our members aren't consulted, and then the technology breaks and they have to fix it. Another piece of the puzzle for customer service representatives is that a lot of decisions that airlines make is made in a black box. So you go to the counter, you're told that, oh, you're on a flight 2 days from now. That's the only one that's available. This has been made in a black box. Our members don't have anything to do with that decision, but they take the brunt of the frustration and the harassment, and they don't get support from the industry, from their employers, in order to deal with the harassment that is coming to them. That's one additional piece of the puzzle. And I will say that we're not opposed to technological change. We want to work together to get the highest quality technological change possible to make sure that we can deliver the best service possible.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'll hazard.
You have 1 minute exactly.
Oh, look, that's lots of time. I'm going to shift to ask Mr. Morrison from the National Airlines Council a question. The wage subsidy was really designed by the government as a tool to avoid the attrition of employees during the pandemic. And I think among airlines, there were different experiences. Some airlines, major airlines, took the wage subsidy and some didn't. Could you provide some comments overall on the success of the wage subsidy in stemming the loss of skilled employees and what the experiences of those different airlines that took different approaches were?
So very briefly, I know I don't have much time. You're right in saying that different airlines use the different recovery programs in different ways, and I can't speak to the individual experiences of them all. I can say, in fact, it was just a report I saw this morning from StatsCan, who referred to those various COVID recovery programs as a lifeline for the airline sector. If it weren't for many of those programs, there would really be questions as to in terms of the viability today of a Canadian airline sector. So they ensured that airlines could continue to operate in extremely difficult circumstances, and to get us to the point where, again, today we're back to or very close to 2019 or pre-pandemic levels. So that's good news for the traveling public.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrison, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Next, we have Mr. Muse. Mr. Muse, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all witnesses for your testimony here today. My question is, first question is for Mr. McKenna, and I forget the reference, but I read somewhere that you were quoted in November 2021 as saying, we're ready to go. It's the government that's holding us back. So, we're a year later, so I guess I'd like to ask, is this still true? What's better, if anything? And how do we best fix what needs to be fixed in terms of holding back the sector?
Well, it is better in that we have, we've done away with COVID measures. You know, to comment also on what my colleague Mr. Morrison was saying, the wage subsidy helped, but it doesn't keep an airline routes flying if there are no passengers. It just kept the lights on for many companies. What's better now is that there is a growth in demand, so there's a growth in service. The government is not there yet because the government is still working from home, and I mean the delays for getting service requests executed are extremely long, and that's postponing our recovery.
Maybe you can elaborate a bit more on that because that's a problem that we've noticed elsewhere as well, just with the number of people in government departments working from home, and that's delaying a lot of the things that need to get done. How does that compare to pre-pandemic? A year now since you noted there was government holding us back, and what do you see in the next year or two to get that backlog cleared?
Well, our members have visa application spending, rate card application spending, type certificate application spending, medical approvals and license renewals, professional exams, pilot proficiency tests, aircraft certification. All this stuff is taken 3 and 4 times longer than it ever has, and we don't understand why is that. Transport Canada is short of resources, and it's short of competent resources, experienced people. They don't recruit from the air transport industry anymore. They recruit. They have other standards now, but very few people have aviation experience, and it's just causing great delays.
Right. So, picking up on that, maybe Mr. Donald, is he on audio now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So you had talked about and very detailed breakdown of 58,000 by 2028, which is an astonishing figure. And I think you referred to a competence-based assessment process. You talked about sort of the long bureaucratic processes that we've been faced with that are holding things back. And Mr. McKenna just commented on that. So maybe you can elaborate a bit further on how do we get things moving. And we're not going to get 58,000 people all at once, but how do we tackle that?
As I alluded to in my remarks, we need to improve the process for bringing in foreign trained workers, foreign AMEs. As I said, Canadian companies want to hire Canadians, but when we don't have them, we need experienced workers and better access to them. Adding those 2 NAIC codes I referred to will help. As well, we need what I was referring to with competency is Transport Canada follows a mechanical bureaucratic process comparing what an individual studied in India or Frankfurt or any other country against what they set out in 566 that Canadian colleges must teach. That no longer makes sense. It never did, but it's even worse now. And Transport Canada needs to move to a competency-based assessment for foreign AMEs coming to Canada. This individual can work on an Air Canada plane in Frankfurt, but can't work on it here. It doesn't make sense. I can go on, but I'll stop there.
That makes good sense to us too, because obviously, as you pointed out, trying to match those credentials from jurisdiction to jurisdiction has been cumbersome and has delayed the process.
Could I just add something to that, sir?
Absolutely, please.
It takes 4 years to train an AME in Canada. That's twice. That's a training requirement by Transport Canada. That's twice as long as any other jurisdiction. Why is that? And that's because that regulation has not been amended since the 90s, and they're not taking into consideration the new teaching technologies and even the new teaching environment and the operating environment. So that is a disincentive to get people to come to our industry.
Certainly. Yeah, decades long, as you pointed out in your testimony, decades old regulation, which really needs to be updated compared to other jurisdictions like the US, UK, and Europe, as you mentioned.
Thank you very much, Mr.
I might
Hughes.
know more time.
Your time is up. Next, we have Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes. Sorry, Mr. Rogers, you're still on mute. Good sir. There you go.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you and welcome to all the guests today. We've heard many people, witnesses, talk about various reasons for labor shortages. But I was really intrigued, and I want Ms. Thiessen to confirm for me the numbers when she talked about Sunwing. If I heard her right, they had 800 applications for 100 jobs. And were these local pilots or were these international pilots? Ms. Thiessen?
The information that I have from our members is that there were 800 applications for a pilot job posting, and 148 people were hired. I don't know where they were hired from. I don't know what their previous experience was.
So that leaves a substantial number of people, 600 plus, that are still out there. I'm assuming they went to work for other airlines somewhere. But I was amazed at that number when you said that, after hearing so many people talk about the labor shortages and the number of, lack of pilots to fly planes. Anyway, thank you for that. Appreciate the information. I want to ask Mr. Donald a question. If your organization states that the education training programs have not kept pace with the rapidly evolving technological needs of the industry, moreover, sector-wide, there is a limited capacity to educate and train interested students. So can you elaborate on these educational training shortcomings and why the aviation and aerospace industries have not amended the issues, and what is preventing the industry from doing so? Mr. Donald?
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I'm not sure what report you're reading from, but it is correct that colleges in Canada are required to teach what is mandated by Transport Canada. Their transport says how many hours, it has to be in the classroom, it cannot be remote. There was an extension for pandemic, blah, 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 but that has not been extended. That curriculum is out of date. It still insists that students have a knowledge of cloth wings and wood structures. Transport Canada, we've spoken to them. They have said they will update it, but they have not. And we've been saying this for 3, 4, 5 years. It hasn't been updated since 1999. They're requiring students learn things that are no longer in airplanes. It defies logic. And that's one of the things that an AME from Germany can be refused on, is that they didn't study cloth wings and wood structures. So they can't get their license here. And so TC says, well, okay, fine, go take a course on cloth wings and fabric structure and wood structures. Nobody will teach that. So I'll stop there.
Oh, I appreciate the information and the answer. For NAV Canada, in your opinion, Mr. Gerard or Mr. Bag, what actions need to be taken to attract and retrain more workers to your industry? I know you alluded to some things, but I'd like to have a detailed response if you could.
Yeah, it is very hard actually to attract people, for the simple reason that we're all competing for the same people a lot of the times. And at NAV Canada, unfortunately, with the longer training programs, it makes it somebody has to make a very much a time commitment in order to get a job at the end and be in training for 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure that the government can't do anything, but at NAV Canada, what we do is that we make the jobs very interesting from a working condition environment, and we offer a lot of great opportunity inside of NAV Canada. We have been in the top 100 employers for a number of years in a row, and very proud of that. And we think that this is attracting the right people into the business.
Thank you very much. In your opinion, what actions can we take on the technology front to reduce stress and workload on ATC workers?
Well, there are a lot of things that we're implementing from a technology perspective, and we've submitted a number of those to the NTCF funds that we've been approved, and we actually thank the government very much for that. But we're looking at technology in line with what ICAO recommends that countries should move in order to stay up with the great service that is delivered. So things like trajectory-based operation that makes it very interesting for controllers as well as increase on safety and efficiency. And the way that it makes it very interesting for them is it takes a lot of the more mundane tasks to leave the tasks that are very interesting when you actually sit in position and control airplanes.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Girard. Sorry to cut you off.
No
Unfortunately, Mr. Rogers' time is up. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Next, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll continue with Mr. Roberts. In fact, I wanted to keep on talking about the difficulty in attracting pilots, and I'd like to talk about pilot training. We have pilot schools, obviously. They train pilots. We have them in Quebec and elsewhere. We have them, one in Mirabel, which is one of the main areas in Quebec where pilots are trained in French. Unfortunately, the Montreal airport has increased its fees in a major way for takeoff and landing. So how do you perceive this when, in fact, we have trouble attracting pilots? We have a piloting school, and in other places in Quebec, people on the ground complain about the noise of landing planes and planes that take off. It's not the case in Mirabel. So these complaints force pilot schools to either close or move. And at the end of the day, this makes the pilot shortage even worse. So what do you think the government could have done and should do? Well, you have to understand, a pilot who's just finished school is not someone I can hire the next day, because this pilot doesn't have the flight hours. Take the Sunwing example. 600 people applied, but none of those candidates were qualified. They lacked experience or hours, and maybe that's why they only have 150 employees. Pilot schools? Well, at the moment, I have 200 CVs in human resources, but we can't hire those people because they don't have enough flight hours. They haven't spent enough time up in the air in a commercial aircraft. In future, for instance, if the government had a program which did not cost a person $70,000 or $90,000 to get their license, well, clearly you'll attract more people if it's less expensive to work in that field. Not many people today, especially given inflation, where you'll find a parent who can afford to spend the tuition. So a young person might go to Cégep and learn to be a mechanic. So why don't we have piloting programs in Cégep? 10 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Girard. I just wanted to know from NAV Canada whether the current shortage threatens certain regional airports and towers where there's less traffic at the end of the day. Very good question. Short answer, no. We have 200 people being trained right now, 500 over the next 2 years. And as we bring in more people, we hope to fill up those courses. And the numbers should go up, and air traffic should also go up. Thank you, Mr. Girard, and thank you, Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I have a question for Mr. Girard from NAVCAN. Mr. Girard, during the pandemic, the committee heard both from NAVCAN and from the union representing NAVCAN workers about this risk of losing skilled employees during the pandemic and the impact that would have in terms of the overall operation, particularly in skilled fields where years of experience and training were required to perform really specialized roles. I'm wondering, at this juncture, can we look back and could you tell us a little bit about what actually transpired? Were these fears realized? I know at the time NAVCAN was looking to the federal government for fairly significant financial support. I don't believe that was received in the amounts that were requested. But did we actually see this accelerated loss of experienced personnel during the pandemic?
Well, what I can share with you is that we did see people leaving, some of it through programs. You have to understand that 66% of our cost is people. So we had to take very, very hard decisions at NAV Canada to reduce our workforce by a little over 12%, 12.7 actually percent. That didn't affect anybody directly in operations other than we offered some early incentives to retire. So those were people that were going to retire anyway in a short time frame, or the chances of those people retiring in a short time frame. So these people left. There's other people that left through normal attrition or retirement and things like that we didn't necessarily replace at the time. But it is important to know that we have rehired a lot of these people, 50 people actually, that we have called back and rehired. And during that time period, the COVID, what really didn't help us is that we were unable to train during that time period for a number of different reasons. The first one, for the safety of our employees and ensuring the service delivery. As you can imagine, a trainee and an OGI work very, very closely to one another, and we didn't want to spread the COVID or the chances of COVID. In addition to that, we had a reduction of traffic that was so much that it was very hard to justify how we could qualify people with this low level of traffic. That was questioned both by the union as well as Transport Canada. So unfortunately, we had to let go those trainees, so we didn't make any headway during that time. We have since rehired most of these trainees. In the last year, we qualified about 100 of them, and as I said before, we still have about 250 trainees in the system. So yes, there are people that left.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Girard. Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach. Next, we have Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My first question will be for Mr. Morrison. You had mentioned about digitizing travel, and I assume that would improve efficiency. Do you believe that Canada has the capacity to adopt its own digitized platform, or do you believe that we would need an outside companies to assist us or international partners to do this?
Thank you for the question, and I apologize if there's background noise. We're starting to get our first trick-or-treaters at the door. I can't comment on the best platform or who could best deliver the platforms. What I can say is that technology, as was discussed previously, can play a role in improving and bringing efficiencies to the travel system. Even with something like ArriveCam, which of course has been hotly debated over the past several months, the fact that its purpose has now been transitioned to be a voluntary tool for customs purposes has proven to be, I think, more beneficial than it had been in its previous iteration. So I can't speak to the providers, but I can speak to the technology that it can absolutely serve a purpose in terms of improving efficiency.
Of travel that you would believe would benefit from digitization?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question.
You don't have any specific aspects of travel that you believe would benefit from digitization?
I think there's various points along the travel experience that could benefit. I think clearly baggage handling, although still requiring the human capacity, is something that we've seen has benefited from technology. Again, customs and security is something that we have seen benefit. There can be more that could be done in that, and especially, we're seeing currently a dispute with the United States on Nexus. One of the easy fixes that we have proposed is the fact that virtual meetings could be held that would replace in-person meetings. So again, another use for technology to improve. So different points along that ecosystem. And again, we can talk further about that, but it absolutely has a purpose.
Is the ArriveCAN app, is that somewhat similar to the Nexus? Would it take on that function? Are you aware of that?
So ArriveCAN now is being used in, I believe, 4 Canadian airports for essentially customs and border services. I actually just recently came back from an international trip and used ArriveCAN as a voluntary means, and it did help to accelerate my processing through the customs hall. Nexus is complementary, and of course it too has benefited a great number of Canadians. We really hope that the Americans and the Canadian government can work together to make sure that the current disputes are resolved, because there's now currently a backlog of over 350,000. But they absolutely can work in tandem and should. But until we get this problem with Nexus resolved, we're not really at a point of discussing how the two can interact.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for Mr. Girard. COVID-19 and the reduced demand on air travel clearly had a severe impact on your operations and revenues. We heard from Mr. Morris, he testified about the wage subsidy and that was a lifeline. What happens if there's a resurgence of COVID? It seems imperative that post-pandemic air travel must continue undisrupted. How would you assess NAVCAN's operational buffer if there's a resurgence of COVID?
Well, that's really hard to say. You're asking me to speculate a lot here, but it all depends when it happens, and it all depends how much time that we have to recover. But I think that what we've proven over the years is with the current model that we have a lot of resilience in how we can answer to these crises. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this is going to reoccur, because we all know that in the aviation business, every 10 years or so, there's something that happens that we have to recover from. But I believe that NAV Canada is very, very well positioned to be very resilient in those cases, and we've proven that over and over the years.
Well, I'm really glad to hear about that resiliency. My question is more concerned about helping the industry to make sure that we can learn from the past lessons. And so I'm concerned about if we do, as you said, the potential is there that it will happen again. But what happens if we impose those same mandates, that same level of restrictions? What would the impact be on the industry in terms of resiliency?
10-second response, please.
Yeah, the impact would definitely not be good, in the sense that our revenue would diminish and we would have to access money in other ways. We have
We're going to have to end it there, unfortunately, Mr. Girard. Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis, for your questioning. Next, prochainement, nous avons Madame Koutrakis. Madame Koutrakis, la parole est à vous. Vous avez 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for appearing at our committee this afternoon. My first question is for Mr. Roberts of PASCAN. I heard in your testimony earlier where you said regional aviation is at risk and it needs help ASAP. I'm curious to know whether your company took advantage of the wage subsidy or any of the support programs that the government put forth.
Absolutely. It saved my business.
So you were able to maintain your employees, or were some employees let go and not rehired? I'm just curious to know what the number of employees you had pre-pandemic, and where you're at right now.
Pre-pandemic, we were probably about 140, and today we're at 200.
Okay, great. And if you haven't already done so, can you suggest some specific recommendations that you would like to see this committee make in its report? I mean, you made a compelling, testimony here before us, and I'd be curious to know and give you the opportunity to elaborate what you would like to see specifically included in this report.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So we obviously know there's a pilot shortage. That's not a surprise. It's been there for a long time. It's not going away. We're able to train new pilots. The problem we're having is getting those pilots qualified with enough hours to fly the main line. To do so, we're unable to replace the amount of qualified pilots that we're losing to the bigger carriers. So Air Canada or WestJet, they can come in, they'll hire our pilots will give us a 2-week notice. It takes me 3 months to train and replace that pilot. The problem that we're seeing is the pool of those pilots to replace the experienced pilots is drying up. There's the barrel is almost empty. So I don't know how we're going to find a way to replace those pilots going forward. If we're missing 58,000 professionals in the next 5 years, I don't know where they're going to come from, and I really don't have any solution.
Thank you for that. And my next question is to Ms. Thiessen. You spoke about, wages and compensation and perhaps employers not doing or offering the work experience that they should be offering to their employees. And perhaps this might help Mr. Roberts as well, maybe together, with the unions and the employers, there are some workings that need to be done together. So, Ms. Thiessen, besides enhanced wages and compensation, what other things can be done to attract and retain workers? And what kind of work or collaborative work has your union or your membership with employers to address the labor shortages? Are you working collaboratively? Are you exchanging ideas?
It's a great question. And where we can, we are working collaboratively. Ms. Dias would have the very specific examples of exactly where we're working collaboratively with employers to fill positions. A few that come to mind for me would be with some of the baggage handlers and other groups we've worked to make sure we're raising wages for workers. So that's specifically thinking about raising wages, working conditions, fair scheduling practices, thinking about new technology when it is implemented and how to make sure that workers are consulted ahead of time, and that then when they're working with that new technology, it that employers are still treating workers as humans, as people that are valuable to the business. And we do have agreements across all sectors, not just in aviation, where we specifically say that when new technology is introduced, the union has to be consulted, and that there is a committee of workers who then work with employers to implement that kind of technology. And then if there are other examples, we'll get them together for you and send them off.
Thank you for that. Mr. Chair, through you, I'd like to ask, a number of our witnesses here this afternoon touched upon the issue of immigration. And I'd like to say that on April 4th, 2022, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship announced new measures to address Canada's labour shortages. These measures included a temporary policy that will allow recent international graduates with expiring temporary status to stay in Canada longer. So I'm wondering if our witnesses feel that the extension of a temporary policy in allowing visitors to the country to apply for a work permit would be a solution. And if not, what kind of changes do you see or recommend to our immigration policies that will help fill up that gap?
20-second response, please.
I can just add one. I think, first of all, and this was discussed by, I believe, Mr. McKenna and Mr. Donald, the recognition of foreign credentials, although they may not be exactly the same as Canadian requirements through Transport Canada, some form of more efficient recognition of foreign credentials would be really helpful to ensure a stable supply of new immigration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrison, and thank you, Ms. Koutrakis. Next, we have Mr. Strahl. Mr. Strahl, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. To follow up on that line of questioning, I think the minister can announce that she's willing to, he's willing to allow people to come into the country or stay in the country. But Mr. Donald, did I hear you correctly when you said that 99% of AMEs are denied by Transport Canada, foreign AMEs, when they apply to have their credentials recognized? Did I hear that number correctly?
You did. That was a report published by CAMAC, which is the Quebec Sector Council for the aerospace industry. It
Right.
was a report published about 2 years ago.
So having people come in and then not letting them work in the sector is obviously not going to provide much of a solution. I was interested to note in comparing that testimony of yours that 99% of foreign trained AMAs are rejected, that Mr. Roberts referenced an EB2 program in the United States that has basically takes anyone and everyone that's been trained up to a certain level of no questions asked and will bring them into the U.S. to work as pilots. What can be done? Obviously, Transport Canada is the barrier here for getting AMEs recognized. What needs to change there? How can we work on equivalencies between similarly skilled nations, if we can call it that? We do it in other sectors. Have you heard that Transport Canada even sees this as a problem, and are they working to, with the US FAA, UK, EU were referenced, what are we doing to ensure that we recognize equivalencies and that this problem of essentially banning everyone, 99% from working, gets solved? That's to Mr. Donald, if there's a solution there. Are we working on, is Transport Canada working to improve this, or are they, from your perspective, satisfied with that 1% acceptance rate?
I believe that they think that the gaps in education can be filled more easily than they can. I don't believe that they understand completely that you cannot take a short course on the missing academic credential. It does not exist. So I don't believe that they are working on a solution to that problem. I think the solution is moving to a competency-based system as opposed to simply comparing what was studied in Germany or India against what Transport Canada requires.
You presented very compelling testimony in that regard. I wanted to go quickly to Mr. McKenna. This seems to be a theme that we're hearing. We certainly saw it with the Passport Canada fiasco, where we don't have enough people working back at their offices. We have, you said, 3 to 4 times longer to get things done than it used to be. You mentioned that is idling equipment. Can you give some examples of, I know you listed off a number of things where it's now taking 3 or 4 times longer. It used to be 90 days. 3 or 4 times longer than 90 days is now a year. How is that impacting, obviously, people staying in the industry? We're talking about a labor shortage. If it takes a year to get recertified or a year to get back to work, what impact is that having on the workforce?
As was mentioned with the visa applications, it's good to change the policy to allow immigration, but then again, the administration of that policy is something altogether different. You've got a huge backlog of people waiting for processing, and it's not happening. Policy is great, but I mean, you got to be able to do it. We've got members who have purchased planes and can't fly them because they have not been but approved or included in the operating certificate. So they're sitting on the ground until that's done, and that could be months. And this is very valuable equipment that's just sitting there. So and there are numerous examples that carriers can give you to that effect. So It's a question of delays. It's not a question of policy in many cases, except for, as Rob was referring, as Rob Donald was referring, certain regulations that really need to be updated.
Right.
But those that have, there are no boots in place to carry it out.
Right.
That's
And
the problem.
you've mentioned that the UK, the EU, and the US FAA are all doing it better. Can you expand on that? Why are they doing so much better than Transport Canada is in this regard?
Because they've updated their regulations.
10-second response, please.
They've updated their regulations to make it more current and with modern technology.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strahl. Next, we have Mr. Badaway. Mr. Badaway, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank the the witnesses for coming out today and giving us their testimony. As many of you know, if not all of you know, this has been a study that's been very in-depth. We've heard a great deal of testimony from many of the witnesses that we would expect would be contained within the final report, and with that would be responded to by the minister and the department. So I guess where I'm going to go with this is to give you an opportunity, each one of you, to give some testimony that in fact would be then therefore finding its way to the final report, and again to be responded by the minister to that testimony. So I'm going to start off with Mr. Roberts. I guess I'm going to give you the stage right now to provide us with anything that you haven't yet, and again that you would like to see as part of the final report.
Yes, thank you. I guess one thing that could help me fairly quickly is to reevaluate the flight and duty requirements for 703 and 704 operators, and equally review this new regulation for regional operators like Pascan Aviation. A one-size-fits-all does not work for regional aviation today. The rules were put in place for companies like Air Canada and WestJet, and they are impacting us significantly. If that's something that we could look at, that would be of greatest benefit to our company and possibly many other smaller airlines in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Morrison?
I'll mention one thing. I would really encourage the committee to look at the new program that was introduced by the British government today, Generation Aviation. They're facing the exact same problems that Canada is. They're tackling it with a federal program that works, by the way, with airlines and other employers to promote careers, to actually partner and to get skills training into the schools and to appeal to a career in aviation to young people there. So I'd encourage you to look at the program, and let's look at potentially duplicating it here in Canada.
Mr. Morrison. Ms. Thiessen?
Okay, I have three things. One, when it comes to training, we need to make sure that we're not just relying on experienced workers. An experienced worker doesn't become experienced without training and experience. So we need to make sure we're moving with the whole pipeline, and that includes making sure there's enough seats in schools so that people can get the training that they need. Another one is thinking about that living wage piece. Airports are not-for-profit institutions that are mandated to contribute to community economic development. Paying people fairly would be one piece of the puzzle to building the community around the airport, and always working collaboratively. To the question that was posed to me earlier, we work collaboratively with our employers in all sorts of different situations, and we'd be happy to make sure we're implementing the right solutions to retain workers that are hired and attract workers that need to be hired.
Thank you, Ms. Thiessen. Mr. Gerard?
Very quickly, three items come to mind. The first one is that we need to modernize how we train and license people, especially for our air traffic controller group, where we need to move to competency-based licensing as opposed to geographic licensing. So something that we need to work on with Transport Canada. Secondly, and it's been identified in others and it affects us as well, any help that we can get to bring in skilled foreign hires that require labor-intensive labor market impact assessment right now would be very beneficial for us. We've benefited from hiring somebody from Ukraine, actually, with the let that the government gave us. So anytime we can bring somebody with experience as opposed to right off the street would help us. And finally, a little bit more broadly, we'd be interested in discussing with the government to make investment in the planned modernization of our training programs and supportive technology for that.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. Mr. McKenna? No, Mr. McKenna. Mr. Donald.
Three things also. First of all, making sure that regulations reflect the reality that we live in, which is not the case right now. Secondly, while during the in the last 10 years, while the demand for our services has grown by about 5% a year, the Transport Canada safety budget has been consistently cut, and actually for over the 90s was cut by 25%, making it basically impossible for them to carry out their mandate. So the efficiency has dropped to historic lows. And finally, help. We've been proposing for years that the government offer a loan guarantee program to help people access funds to train commercially. this has basically a very low risk for the government. For a few $100,000 would help train many, many pilots.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Mr. Donald? You're on mute, Mr. McDonald.
Apologies. Ms. Thiessen referred to having enough seats in schools to train people. Every college in Canada teaching aviation maintenance engineering programs has a wait list, some up to 2 years, with the only exception is ENA out of Quebec. And yet they're not producing enough graduates. Nobody's going to wait 2 years to get into a program. They'll go into construction or other industries. That's a huge issue. I don't believe it's realistic to believe that provincial governments will fund the massive investment in brick and mortar institutions needed to bring that capacity up to what we need. Although SAIT just got a grant to increase their capacity, but they admit it's unusual. Therefore, we need new ways to train. We need tools for industry to train their own people off the street who don't have prior experience and who don't go to college programs. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Mr. Begg. And I'm going to try and get to Mr. Gagnon in 30 seconds, so if we can make these comments quick, that would be great. You're on mute.
Sorry, Mr. Begg, we can't hear you.
Apologies, that was covered by Mr. Girard previously. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gagnon?
Merci. Je veux...
Thank you. I think people don't realize the extent to which the situation is critical. It was urgent before the pandemic, but now it's critical. If you take pilots for the next 10 years, we'll need 65,000 more just in North America. So we'll have to train 20 pilots a day. It'll be a really tough situation. We have to bring in measures for small organizations like PESCA. The situation is exacerbated because our pilots are being drawn away by larger carriers. This is happening around the world. We're actually competing with everyone else in the world. My colleague, Mr. Roberts, talked about changes in the flight and duty regulations. I think there are other things that need to be done, especially with regard to the retirement age for larger employers. Thank you, Mr. Gagnon. Unfortunately, you've run out of time. We now have Mr. Basalou-Duval. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Roberts and Mr. Gagnon talked about their fear of a pilot shortage and seeing that worsen, especially for regional carriers, because they're on the front lines and the larger carriers are going to poach their pilots. So I have a question, because I was told that a pilot with a solo license and who's just graduated won't be in a position to fly a commercial aircraft. There's still a lot of work to be done before you reach that level. There's a difference between flying a Cessna and flying a passenger airplane. So my question is this: can anything be done to help the pilots to go from A to B, from smaller to larger aircraft? Mr. McKenna, I don't know if you have any opinions on this. Otherwise, I know that Mr. Roberts and Gagnon do have opinions on it. Well, I really like to hear from carriers. I'd like to hear what they think about this.
Un pilote aujourd'hui qui sort de l'école.
A graduating pilot today will fly fire patrol aircraft, smaller aircraft. They'll be flight instructors, but there's so much pressure. But there are fewer and fewer opportunities like this. So as you move forward, there will be fewer pilots. It'll be harder for them to get their hours and to graduate to the larger carriers. We've been talking about this for years. So I don't think there's a silver bullet, so to speak, to fix the problem. we can't reduce the number of flight hours to move pilots along to larger aircraft. That's not a solution. We need pilots to be able to put in their hours with smaller companies. And unfortunately, those are slowly disappearing off the map. So it's harder for young pilots to get experience. Mr. Gagnon, you were cut off a little earlier when you were talking about potential solutions. So maybe you want to continue now? 10 seconds. Well, I mentioned the retirement age because for larger carriers, the age of retirement is 65. I think that number could be reviewed. And in terms of the money, as my colleague said, $100,000 to get a commercial pilot's license, well, that's out of reach. Thank you very much, Mr. Gagnon. Next.
Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
All right, I'd like to return to this issue of contract flipping and the impact it has on employees in the air transport sector. And I'm looking at a government press release from 2018 here. This was when Patty Hajdu was the employment minister, and the release says, finally, the minister will be recommending a regulation extending the protection of remuneration levels to workers covered by a collective agreement at airports and airlines following contract retendering. The practices of contract retendering or, quote, contract flipping are serious issues at some Canadian airports, and we are taking action. We will work with stakeholders during the regulatory process to ensure we get this right. So to Ms. Thiessen, I'm curious, did the government ever bring this regulation forward? And if they did, why does the problem associated with contract flipping still persist at our airports?
We've been advocating to end the worst effects of contract flipping at airports for a really long time. And we made 3 recommendations. 2 of the 3 recommendations have been implemented, slightly watered down, but implemented. And it's the 3rd one that still needs to change. So now a worker that is rehired will be rehired at the wage that they had before with the previous contracting company, but they're not guaranteed to keep their job, and they don't keep all the other protections or benefits that had been negotiated or earned, including vacation pay, potentially scheduling and those sorts of things. So we asked for 3 changes to be made. 2 of them have been made, and this one to implement full successor rights is the one that's left. So that's the confusion there.
And on that point, I'm curious, in your conversations with the government, have they told you why they did not act on that 3rd point? It seems like a fairly major one, that you don't get to keep your job necessarily, and the other non-wage benefits aren't included in the regulation. Can you speak to what their rationale was there?
I can't, but I can tell you that we're very hopeful something like this the change that we're asking for could be made soon. You may have seen, all of the MPs may have seen our campaign on this topic. We'll probably be meeting with you, hopefully in short order, to discuss this topic. It's incredibly important to our members in the aviation sector and other sectors as well who are impacted by contract flipping, that the change is made so that we can protect the quality of people's work, particularly in a labor shortage environment where we need to be increasing the quality of work, not decreasing it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thiessen, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Next, we have Mr. Strahl. Mr. Strahl, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I thought we had some interesting recommendations during Mr. Badaway's intervention, but I did find it interesting to have one of the, I think it was Mr. Gagnon, say we're competing against everyone else in the world. And certainly what we're hearing today is that the government isn't keeping up, that we are actually letting down the industry by failing to recognize foreign credentials, failing to recognize people who want to come here and work in our industry. The government bureaucracy is set up is arrayed against those people instead. So I want to go to Mr. Morrison. You mentioned in your testimony that there are obstacles to the recognition of foreign credentials and that the government needs to do more to promote airlines both domestically and around the world. what are, we've heard about the Transport Canada obstacles. Are there other obstacles or are there other interests that are against perhaps recognizing those foreign credentials in your experience?
Yeah, so first, just to reiterate, that's absolutely true that we are competing not just with other sectors within Canada, but this is an international competition. I mean, countries around the world are all competing for, the same pools of skilled laborers. I think Mr. Donald had identified a couple, in some cases, bizarre examples, but yet they exist of those bureaucratic requirements that Transport Canada has in place regarding training. It's not just that. I talked a bit about the delays in pilot certification for health purposes and so forth. I was recently with an airline employee who was giving me a tour of an airport. He couldn't actually get through parts of the airport because his certification, his employee certification, had expired the day prior, and it was only good for 1 year. So, quick examples like that show why did he have to recertify every year for something that in other jurisdictions is good for 5 or 10 years.
Right.
It's little examples like that add up and that really kind of put employees at a disadvantaged position.
And we heard in previous testimony from Andrew Gibbons from WestJet, for example, about how the instability in the industry caused by, I think he used an accordion approach of regulation, what impact that had, and we've heard this again and again on how employees in the sector have left, not just because of the mandates, but because of the insecurity of the industry as a whole. And I noted when the COVID measures were lifted, it was made very clear by the Minister of Health, by the Minister of Transport, that this was simply a suspension, that at any time the government could slam back those regulations that had punished the industry back into place, depending on what they deemed to be necessary at the moment. What impact, again to Mr. Morrison, does that have on your members and on the employees that have experienced, whether they were subsidized by the government or not, a loss of income, a loss of security over the last couple of years? What impact does that have, not having the security that these regulations, that these restrictions could be slammed back into place at any time without warning by the government?
It's very difficult for everyone in the sector not having that certainty moving ahead in terms of where we're going. And I'll give a very brief example. In the past several months prior to the pandemic restrictions being lifted, we saw a significant increase in the amount of harassment and abuse being faced by airline employees, particularly flight attendants, who were in the position of having to enforce the mask mandate on flights. It's one of the reasons why we called so strenuously for that particular measure to be lifted, because we wanted to protect the well-being of our workers, not having to enforce that particular measure. If we had something like that reimposed, I mean, not only would we be facing, again, a significant increase in harassment and abuse of our employees, but it would destabilize a lot of the workforce who, frankly, would not be certain if they would have a job in 6 months or 8 months down the road. So we very much hope that reimposition is not on the table for the travel and tourism sector, especially when we have evidence that, in fact, it did very little to nothing to curb community spread of COVID.
Mr. Chair.
You have 20 seconds left, Mr. Strahl.
Well, I will generously give that back to the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strahl.
Very giving.
Next and finally for today, we have Mr. Chahal. Mr. Chahal, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for everyone providing testimony today. I'll start off with NAV Canada, Mr. Gerard. I'd like to know a little bit more on shortages with air traffic controllers. Are we seeing this around the world? And what are the impacts here in Canada?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Around the world is a big place, sir. So in some jurisdiction, yes, I would say probably in most with the people that we're working with. But I mean, there's other countries that I would not have this data for. I can speak from a knowledgeable place for NAV Canada, and for air traffic controllers specifically, we're looking to hire about 150 people, or I should say we're short about 150 people. And over the years, there's attrition that's going to add on to that. And air traffic controller is obviously very important at NAV Canada, but we've got our flight service specialists that do about the same work, and we're about 50 short of them. And we can have all the air traffic controllers and the flight specialists in the world. If we don't have technologists to repair and install and maintain our equipment, then these people cannot do their job without their equipment. And in the next year, we're looking to hire about 187 of these people.
What percentage of air traffic controllers are successful in completing their training? You've talked about the numbers here, but what's your success rate, and how can we improve the folks who aren't able to complete their training? What are the gaps?
So it depends. I can talk to you about success rate historically, and it depends where you qualify. There are a number of different air traffic controllers. They're not all created equal. In the ACCs, we used to have a checkout rate that we call at around 45%. In the towers, it was around 55%. I was talking about the flight service specialists, around 75% the success rate. That was pre-COVID 2019. As I said, we've recalled a lot of the trainees, and we have a bit better success rate than we used to have pre-2019. And we've done a bunch of different things in order, and making training a priority was one of them. And obviously we have our unionized employees as well that are involved in the training and that are doing an excellent job at training and qualifying these people. So there's a lot of different activities. But I was talking, to answer your second question, I was talking about different areas where we can work with the government, with Transport Canada, to modernize our qualification, our training and qualification model. Right now, if you're a controller and you've qualified in Vancouver Tower and you want to train in Dorval Tower, there's a lengthy training program because we retrain you. Even if you're a qualified air traffic controller, we retrain you on how to be a controller in Dorval, as opposed to recognizing as part of the training program that you're already qualified and you already have at least the basic qualifications to be a controller that you gain from another facility. So we have to modernize that training and qualification to be more based on competency as opposed to geographical location. And that is work that we need to carry on with Transport Canada. So any help that the committee can bring there would be mostly appreciated.
I want to go back to a comment you made. You said about 45% success rate and 55%. What are you doing to improve those success rates, so we get those numbers higher, specifically on your training programs with your employees who are going through the program?
Yeah, a lot of different things that we're doing. For example, one of the things that we've done recently, we've established a group of senior managers, and on a monthly basis, we talk about every single trainee that has any difficulty. So one of the areas that I think that we've improved is that at times we would wait until there was a recommendation for cease training in order to take action. And what we do now is that we get involved a lot easier, and then we invest on helping both the person in training as well as the person conducting the training and the team responsible for the training into coaching, coaches, into extra simulation run, into whatever the person needs earlier in the process. And as I said, and I don't want to say that we found the solution for everything, but as I said, since we started training again, we have seen a better success rate overall than we had seen pre-COVID 2019.
Thank you very much, Mr. Girard, and thank you, Mr. Chahal. On behalf of the committee members, I would like to thank all of our witnesses for giving us their time and expertise on this Halloween evening. I wish you a wonderful Halloween for those of you going out with your children. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Merci.